The Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R, known for its agile handling, powerful engine, and iconic Ninja styling. Over the years, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R has undergone several updates and improvements to keep up with the changing demands of riders. From its early days as a humble 600cc sport bike, to its current iteration as the 636cc powerhouse in the middleweight class. The ZX6R has always been pushing the boundaries of what a supersport bike can do. And today we are going to be diving into the interesting history of how this middleweight Ninja came to be. The ZX6R was first produced in 1995, but its DNA goes back even further than that. In fact, our story truly begins in 1985 when Kawasaki released its first true middleweight sport bike to the world, the GPZ600R. The GPZ600R, also known as the Ninja 600 here in North America, was a game changer to the world of sport bikes. Credited for being the pioneer of the 600cc middleweight class, the GPZ was powered by a liquid-cooled 592cc inline 4-cylinder engine that produced 75 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful bikes in its class at the time. Although that mostly was because it was in a class all of its own, as this bike actually predates the original CBR600F series, the R6, and even the GSX-R 600. Like I said, a pioneer of the 600cc class. The success of the GPZ600R paved the way for Kawasaki to continue innovating and pushing boundaries in the sport bike market. And in 1990, Kawasaki released their first Ninja ZX6. This ZX6 is the first official genetic link to our modern day ZX6R, and to say the ZX6 was an impressive motorcycle would be selling it short. The ZX6 was more than impressive, it was groundbreaking. To put into perspective why it was so groundbreaking, the top speed of the ZX6 was 147 miles per hour, which may not seem like much, but Kawasaki's 750cc ZX7 had a top speed of just 148 miles per hour, and the quarter mile for the ZX6 was 11.36 seconds versus the ZX7 11.2. So no, it wasn't faster than the ZX7, but it was damn close. The ZX6 made 100 horsepower, which was 9 more than Yamaha's FZR600 and 7 more than Honda's CBR600. The ZX6 had the highest redline at 14,000 RPM. Despite this, the power band was broad and had lots of low-end and mid-range power available. The ZX6 wasn't just a great performer either, it also was rather practical. It had upright ergos and even a center stand. However, the ZX6 wasn't perfect. Although it had no vibrations, it wasn't considered a smooth bike. The throttle response was very abrupt, almost like an on-off switch. Cycle World said that the fault of this was caused by excessive driveline lash. The cush drive in the rear hub was really soft and would actually allow this rear sprocket to turn nearly an eighth of a revolution before the wheel even started rotating. The clutch also had a 3-stage damper, adding even more lash. And on top of that, the bike had a very powerful engine at the time, and it was really responsive on the bottom end range of power. The result of all of this was a bike that hits hard even when you don't want it to. The transmission was also described as being sloppy shifting, which was just added to the unsmooth characteristics of this bike. Despite all of that, the ZX6 was a class-leading motorcycle when it first approached the scene, and it pushed the boundaries of what a 600 could do. Despite the impressiveness of the 1990 ZX6, it wasn't until 1995 that Kawasaki truly made their mark known with the introduction of their ZX6R. This bike took everything that had been learned from the previous models and pushed it even further. It featured an all-new 599cc engine that produced 105 horsepower, allowing this ZX6R to do 0 to 60 in just 3.6 seconds and a top speed of 154 miles per hour. The ZX6R is the first bike in its class to break into the 10s in the quarter mile with an impressive 10.89 second time. The MSRP of the first generation ZX6R was $7,899 though, which was anything but cheap, especially at the time, because adjusted for inflation, that's nearly $16,000 in 2023 money. Your money was well spent though, as you now had the latest and greatest middleweight sport bike on the market, as the ZX6R not only had an increase in power, but also had top-of-the-line suspension, which allowed for sharper handling and greater corner clearance. As mentioned earlier, this was an all-new engine, and Kawasaki made a laundry list of changes internally to improve this engine over the last. Way too many changes to list in this video, just know that they increased the RPM limit, and on paper it made 5 more horsepower than the ZX6, but Cycle World claimed that on the dyno it made 8 more horsepower than the ZX6 they tested. In fact, the ZX6R was only 0.2 of a second and 3 miles per hour slower than Kawasaki's own ZX9R in the quarter mile. Kawasaki also created an all-new 6-speed transmission that had a ton of technical improvements, which allowed this bike to shift much smoother and easier. There's many changes with this bike all over the place. New perimeter style frame, new steering geometry, a shorter wheelbase, new fully adjustable 41mm conventional forks, a KYB rear shock with adjustable compression and rebound damping, spring preload, and ride height adjustment. Stopping this bike is a set of dual 4-piston calipers on semi-floating rotors up front. They also added a handlebar-mounted choke lever. The seat is described as firm, but roomy and well-shaped. There are even bungee hookup points at the rear, passenger grab handles, and under-seat storage designed to hold a U-type lock. And in 1998, Kawasaki released their G series. With this iteration of Kawasaki's ZX6R, they focused on making the bike smaller and more race-focused. The G series had an all-new chassis, race-ready suspension, and new brakes. The suspension and brakes were both borrowed from their ZX9R with a little bit of modification. Kawasaki also overhauled their engine, making it lighter and quieter. Although no official numbers have been confirmed, it is rumored that this engine makes an additional horsepower, bringing the bike up to around that 108 horsepower number. However, Kawasaki is still using the same carburetor setup and had pretty much hit their ceiling on what their engine could do performance-wise. Except that isn't actually true, as in 2000, Kawasaki released the J series, which replaced the G series, and somehow Kawasaki managed to further increase their power to an impressive 112 brake horsepower. They managed this increase by fine-tuning the engine further with an increased compression ratio and by raising the red line. Kawasaki also had other improvements, such as the looks got completely changed. 2 headlight design was finally back, and now they feature a 180 rear tire, a size still used in the middleweight class today. They even added coil unplug wires for the spark plugs and a stronger generator, thus improving the electrical system and the consistency of the spark, allowing them to dial in the new J series even further. However, despite all of this, the 2002 Kawasaki was feeling pressure from all of the other middleweight sport bikes, such as Honda's legendary F4i. The ZX6R was competing well, but Kawasaki started to feel its grip slipping away, and they decided to do something drastic. Something no one else even saw coming. Yup, Kawasaki came in and dropped the 636cc hammer on the class. The new engine was shoved into the J series bodywork, with the only real notable visual move being the 636 stickers on the side of it. Yes, Kawasaki just said, forget the rules, we are doing our own thing here, and we are going to even brag about it on the side of our bike. Now I'm going to go down a quick rabbit hole for you guys. The reason why you see 600s at 599cc is because the bikes, in order to compete in the 600 class, must be below 600cc. It's the same thing with the leader bike class, which is why we see 999cc for all the modern day leader bikes. But Kawasaki just released a 636cc engine, so what gives? Shouldn't that disqualify them from racing? Well, Kawasaki knew they couldn't do that, so what was their solution? They produced 2 engines. A limited amount of ZX6Rs actually featured a 599cc engines, which were used for riders who needed the displacement restricted bikes for racing. This allowed Kawasaki to skirt the displacement rules in the middleweight sport bike market while still being able to compete in the racing market. So Kawasaki's 2002 ZX6R 636 was basically just a punched out motor, but that allowed Kawasaki to bump up their power in 2002 all the way up to 118 brake horsepower, which is another 6 horsepower increase. Everything else more or less was the same until 1 year later in 2003. 2003 was a big year for Kawasaki. Still boasting the 636cc engine, Kawasaki also improved their new Ninja in many ways, most notably by adding fuel injection. In addition, they were able to raise the engine speed by an additional 500 RPM. This resulted in a very slight gain in power. Brakes were also updated and the forks were now inverted. Some chassis improvements resulted in higher rigidity and even less weight. An all-new digital gauge cluster was also introduced and a larger ram intake was added and moved to the center of the headlight running through the headstock. Top speed was also assessed at 163 miles per hour. And again in 2005, Kawasaki updated their ZX-6R once more. Engine speed increased by another 1000 RPM, and other engine and fueling tweaks resulting in a massive increase in horsepower, 131 to be exact, at 12,250 RPM. The frame and swing arm were both updated as well, and the aesthetics of the bikes were also changed. The aluminum frame was now painted black, the fairings were also reshaped slightly, the exhaust now switched to an undertail exhaust. And in 2007, it was a sad year for Kawasaki, as they dropped their 636 from the lineup and only sold their race-legal 599cc iteration. However, this 599cc engine wasn't without changes, as it was technically an all-new engine redesigned from the crankcase up. This engine wasn't the only change either, as the frame, swing arm, suspension, brakes, and body were also completely redesigned. In fact, this bike carried very few parts over from the previous model. And in 2009, Kawasaki changed the appearance of their ZX-6R to mimic their ZX10R more. Kawasaki claimed the new ZX-6R is 22 pounds lighter than the previous model. Kawasaki achieved this weight loss thanks to the newly designed exhaust, which no longer goes underneath the seat, but instead of a more traditional side-mounted look. Kawasaki also introduced Showa big piston front forks to the front as a suspension upgrade over the previous model. And 1 year later in 2010, Kawasaki improved their engine once more and added a slipper clutch. Kawasaki claims that they made the exhaust quieter and made the bike smoother. They also lowered the front seat height as well and made some changes to the intake, giving it more power in the lower and upper RPM. For the next 3 years, the ZX-6R was largely unchanged until 2013 when Kawasaki brought back an old friend. And that old friend went by the name of 636. Yes, this new 2013 ZX-6R 636 was back, and it was back with a completely brand new bike. As expected, engine displacement is yet again back at 636cc with 2 fuel maps available to choose via a switch on the handlebars. This new 636 obviously increased the torque and horsepower, and it was especially noticeable at low RPM when compared to the older bikes. The bodywork was also completely changed as well, with the new front and side fairings, a whole new instrument cluster, a new frame, new Showa BPF SFF front suspension, and also Kawasaki added traction control and 3 rider modes, Sport, City, and Rain, as standard equipment. ABS was also offered as an option. Kawasaki did remove their steering damper because customers were complaining about the old OEM damper from previous models. This 636 was a fantastic bike. It was the most powerful and lightweight 600 offered, and it kept that crown for a very long time. Actually, forever, as no other manufacturer to today has decided to break the rules quite like Kawasaki has. But that's okay. If breaking the rules gives us a better bike in the 636, then I'm actually all for it. And this is held true for so long, even to today. So when I tell you that Kawasaki went 6 years without any updates, it's easy to understand why, as their bike has already been head and shoulders above the rest of the competition. However, in 2019, Kawasaki did give a little bit of love back into their 636 by making it more Euro 4 compliant. They decided to add a quick shifter for upshifts only, updated the bodywork and seat, and added some LED headlights, and updated the instrument cluster. However, being Euro 4 compliant meant that there was a slight drop in horsepower, unfortunately, bringing it down to 127, which, although is disappointing, it is understandable as emissions will always rob horsepower. Also, Kawasaki had a very cheap price tag when it first released, with an MSRP under $10,000, making it not only the fastest 600 in the class, but also the cheapest. Kawasaki definitely did right by their customers and absolutely dominated the 600 market. In 2021, the ZX6R got discontinued in the European markets as Euro 5 emissions became the new requirement and the ZX6R did not meet those standards. And just as I was making this video in early June of 2023, Kawasaki has announced yet another redesign of their ZX6R. Now this redesign is largely based off of the previous generation, except Kawasaki has given their ZX6R another facelift and a new front fairing, which makes it resemble their ZX10R a little bit more. Also, Kawasaki added a full-color TFT display with their Bluetooth connectivity, allowing it for the first time ever their ZX6R to integrate with your smartphone via the Rideology app. Along with a long list of changes, which I do outline in my last video going over this new reveal, this ZX6R is most importantly Euro 5 compliant, which although it is very nice because now it can be sold in the European market, however, it does come at a cost as this model will lose some top-end power, bringing it down to around that 121 horsepower mark. Kawasaki did reveal that some bottom-end power was found, so at least there is some benefit to this new model performance-wise. And that's where we are in 2023. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R 636 still roams the streets and is as fast and capable as ever. The MSRP has slightly increased over the years, which is to be expected, especially with the way inflation has been recently, but it is still extremely affordable at just over 11 grand for the non-ABS version. I made a video about the ZX6R a while back when it first came out, and I called it the best bargain of all sport bikes on the market today, and you know what? I still believe that. The ZX6R is a fantastic motorcycle, and after riding one last year, I could tell you for sure that it is a wonderful bike to ride. The power is extremely smooth, the handling is absolutely spot on, and the one thing that doesn't show up on the stat sheet is just how comfortable this bike is. The Ninja 636 is actually a very comfortable bike. You sit closer to the bars, so there's less of a stretch on your back while riding, making the ZX6R not just a capable track bike with its powerful engine, but also a great street bike that you can ride all day long. So there you have it. This is a brief history of the Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R, from its humble beginnings as a pioneer of the 600 class to absolutely dominating the 600 class while being an icon in the sports bike world. The ZX6R journey showed just how serious Kawasaki was and reinforces my personal belief in Kawasaki as one of the best motorcycle manufacturers today, as they continue to build upon and improve an already spectacular motorcycle. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, then be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks again, take care, and bye-bye.
It's a sick news, pull your little arrows out. Let me live my life, the one I'd better lead. All the blondes of fantasies, and we looked at them 11 ways. You said, look at me, I looked away, and you wrote the song I wanna play. Alright.